Good evening, Baptist Grove. I want to thank you for joining us for Bible study tonight. Tonight's Bible study is very relevant and necessary. It looks a little different from our norm. And the reason is because we have and are living through a global pandemic that still wreaks havoc throughout our world. 1.8 million people have died globally as a result of the coronavirus. Personally, many of us, maybe some of us, have been diagnosed with COVID, and thank God we're still alive. All of us probably know family or friends who have or had the virus. And a very sobering reality of our time is that some of us even have lost loved ones. Our lives have been completely upended as a result of this pandemic. Every corner of the globe has been upended. Life has changed drastically. We have to wear masks wherever we go. And as a church, we've been virtual for almost 10 months. This has been a really difficult time for all of us. Yet, in the midst of this very dark season, there is a ray of hope. A ray of hope that started last year, at the end of the year, when discussions regarding a vaccine picked up. And two companies, Pfizer and Moderna, actually began releasing their vaccine at the end of last year. And yet, even with this ray of hope, I'll say, there's still a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of suspicion. And let's just be honest, as African Americans, given the history, we know about Tuskegee in 1932, what happened to African American men as they were illegally submitted to trials, and many of them experienced the consequences and repercussions of mistreatment and abuse. And so a recent Pew Research study said that 42% of African Americans, only 42%, said that they will actually take the vaccine. This is in comparison to 83% of Asian Americans. So it's important tonight, with all of our questions, with all of our concerns. You may come tonight with many questions and concerns. As a pastor, I've talked to many people in our congregation and outside of our congregation who have expressed concerns. There are some personal questions that we have. Potentially, you're one of the ones who are saying, I'm not going to be the first in line. Or maybe this vaccine came out so quickly, there is no way it can be legit. With all of these questions and concerns that we have, I think it's so important that we do what the Bible says that we should do. In the abundance of counselors, there's safety. And so I believe that it's important that as we have these concerns related to the vaccine, that we take time to talk to medical experts, individuals who are informed, and most importantly, individuals that we can trust. Everyone needs good doctors that you can trust. And we're blessed tonight to have two strong doctors with us. They're committed Christians. They're faithful. I trust them. As a matter of fact, Dr. Jamila is my children's pediatrician. I trust her with my children. And so tonight, Dr. Craig and Dr. Jamila Fletcher are coming to us, and they're going to share in their own way, and educate us and inform us about what this COVID-19 vaccine is. I hope that tonight you'll be encouraged, you'll be strengthened as we talk through some of the realities in the medical world right now, and some of the developments that are happening. And so they're going to come and introduce themselves now in their own way. Dr. Craig and Dr. Jamila Fletcher, thank you so much for joining us tonight and taking out time to speak to our congregation and to our family and friends and visitors about this COVID-19 vaccine. For those who are not aware and don't know you, of course, you've been a member here for some time. You're friends of mine. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Jamila, you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Jamila Fletcher. I'm a private pediatrician and partner at Raleigh Children and Adolescents Medicine, and I have the pleasure to be pediatrician of many of our BGC family. I am actually originally from Raleigh. I went to Enloe High School, Duke University for college, and UNC for medical school and residency. In my capacity as a pediatrician in the community, I've sat on the executive committee for Rex Hospital, and I've been a former chair of the Department of Pediatrics at Rex Hospital, as well as I teach second-year medical students at the School of Medicine at UNC.
So glad to have you, Dr. Jamila.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Craig.
Yes, Craig Fletcher. I've been a member of VGC for about 12 years. My family has. And I'm originally from New York, and I came to North Carolina. I'm a A&T grad. I could just stop right there. I'd be proud. After A&T, I went to University of Florida for my doctorate in veterinary medicine. And then after that, I went to Johns Hopkins, where I did a postdoctoral fellowship in drug development, did a PhD in the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in infectious disease. My PhD was in viral immunology, where I worked in an HIV lab working on therapeutics. After I'm faculty for there, I was recruited to UNC, where I'm now a professor in the School of Medicine. I teach medical students and graduate students, and I'm also Associate Vice Chancellor of Research, where I sit on institutional biosafety committees and other areas where we support research infrastructure and compliance and drug development.
Thank you. So glad to have you, Dr. Craig. Of course, you guys have been members here at Baptist Grove Church for some time. You love the Lord, you're faithful. And again, thank you for joining us tonight. It's important that we have doctors that we can trust, members of the medical community that we can trust, and we know that we can trust you. There's so many ideas and so much skepticism circling around about this COVID-19 vaccine, particularly amongst African Americans and minority communities, given the history and things that have happened in the past. And so tonight, we just want to talk to the congregation. I would love for you all to speak to the congregation and educate us and talk to us about vaccinations in general, and then the COVID-19 vaccine in particular. So I'm going to pose a couple of questions to you.
Sure.
Vaccinations, what exactly is it from a medical perspective? What does it mean? What's happening with our bodies when we are vaccinated against a virus? Can you explain vaccinations in general to us?
Sure.
So as a pediatrician, for decades, every day, I give vaccines to children. And children have a very weak immune system, especially the first month of life. They really rely on their parents to keep them free from germs. And so every 2 to 3 months for the first 2 years of life, children get a vaccine. And what happens when they get a vaccine is that a tiny piece of amino acids or protein is injected into the bloodstream or the muscle, basically. And that triggers an immune response. Just like if you were to catch a cold and the cold virus enters your nose and then your immune response is triggered. So instead of getting sick, when you get a small portion of that protein, your immune response is triggered, but not in a way that you get sick. So there can be side effects, but that's not everyone gets a side effect. Some people do. It is an expected immune response. It lasts 24 to 48 hours. And then when your body sees the real germ or the real virus, it's boosted. So then you now have a memory to how to fight it. And so that when you are exactly exposed to the virus, your body doesn't get sick.
Okay. So children are vaccinated. Majority of us probably as children, or even the ones who have children, have been vaccinated. What are some of the things we've maybe been vaccinated against without? Maybe we are aware or not even aware of it.
That's a good question. So I was going to wear a T-shirt today that has vaccinated and a list of all the diseases that we have been vaccinated from, and it has increased life expectancy. If you were to look at the top 10 medical advances in human history, vaccines is always one of them, because children without these vaccines could die from things like pneumonia, meningitis, whooping cough, polio, measles, meningitis. And so these are all things that we are now protected from. And without vaccines, many of us would be dead.
Okay. So we're alive because we have been vaccinated.
We like to say in pediatrics, vaccines make adults.
Oh, wow. Okay. Vaccines make adults. I like that.
And I would like to add, I think it's an interesting conversation. I think we're in a society of privilege. So right now around the world, there are many kids that are suffering from diseases and dying because of lack of vaccination. And so we don't have to deal with that issue.
Good. So vaccines make adults, and we're alive because of vaccination. We have the privilege of being vaccinated, and we don't want to take that privilege for granted. So as it relates to vaccinations, right? All the vaccinations that you mentioned, or the ones that are more common, do they go through some type of testing? Is there some type of trial period, or do they just release it to the public and let us take it?
Yeah, you want me to handle it? Yeah. So any kind of drug development, and let's just talk about vaccines. Normally, what happens, they do in vitro studies, and then after in vitro studies, which is not in any animals or anything, they after that they go into animal studies, and then after animal studies, and once they figure out that it works in concept and it works in terms of safety, then they go into a small subset of humans. And so once they do that, that's like between 10 and 100 people. And when they do that, that's with informed consent. They actually volunteer, right? And once they do that, they go through a larger study, which is a larger, what they call efficacy and safety study. Once they do that, they collect all the data, and then they submit that application to FDA for approval. Now, there's a lot of different safety drug advisory boards, institutional review committees. There's a lot of things we could talk about that later on, but there's many, many steps. And that process is usually 10 to 15 years. And so it's usually a very tedious progress. And so there's a lot of different steps involved in terms of vaccine development.
So there are trials. You're walking through the steps. From a population standpoint. You talked at the beginning, you said usually 10 to 15 people. When it gets to the latter phases of the trial, how many people are we talking about?
So based on how prevalent the disease is, how many different types of individuals it's going to go into, they do a study to figure out how many people would actually prove that the drug is efficacious and safe. And so, for example, for for Pfizer vaccine, there was about 40,000 people enrolled in the study. And so after the 10 to 100 people, then you have to do a larger study. And then after that initial approval, they still track people for a while. Okay. And there's a reporting mechanism that anytime there's an adverse event, it gets reported to the medical doctor, and that goes back to the review panel, an independent review panel. And then it gets decided if the drug gets pulled off the market or there's some other issues in terms of use.
Okay. And how adverse are we talking? Do they have to stop breathing in order for it to be reported, or is it any type of reaction?
Yeah. So I can answer that. Every time we give a vaccine, there's a vaccine information sheet that we have available for parents to read. And on the back, there's a number and a website where they can report anything they want. Most of the reports are mild. So a fever, headache, body aches, your typical vaccine reactions. But if there's a severe reaction, like an allergic reaction, for example, might be one of the more severe ones, that would also be reported by the doctor.
Okay. So mild or severe.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So there is a process, a trial period, there are steps, there's a review board, and then there's a certain efficacy rate that has to be achieved in order for it to be released?
That's correct.
Okay, excellent. So now let's talk about COVID in particular. Sure. So that's vaccinations in general, COVID in particular. So obviously it's wreaked havoc throughout the globe. All of our lives have been completely upended and altered by this pandemic. What exactly is COVID-19? Like, what is happening to our bodies? Like, we know that the symptoms are varied, but what's happening? Why is it causing so many physical ailments and symptoms?
I can answer that. So COVID-19, unfortunately, because it's a novel virus, meaning the human race has never been exposed to it, there's a wide range of symptoms. So if you have a weakened immune system, it can cause a pneumonia. And then you can also have a secondary inflammatory response where you have almost like an acute respiratory distress syndrome. And that's where you really have the shortness of breath and you need to be in the ICU. And then on the flip side, children, we don't quite understand why this is, partly because their immune system may not be as primed to have a severe response to the virus, but children can be asymptomatic, have no symptoms whatsoever and have it, or it can be a minor cold in a child. And then it's very rare, but we are also seeing a multisystemic inflammatory syndrome condition in children, or MISC, which is similar to adults, but it tends to affect multiple organs.
Okay. So you're seeing some inflammation. Can you break that down a little bit for me?
Yeah.
Inflammation, you said MISC. What does that mean in lay terms? What is that? What's happening?
So in lay terms, your immune system is supposed to respond to anything that is foreign. And so because none of us have ever seen this virus, in some people who have a strong immune system or a hyperimmune system, they are attacking this virus. And unfortunately, that inflammatory response is also attacking their organs.
Okay.
So it can, these receptors are in the lungs, which is why you can see it in the lungs. The receptors can be in the brain. You can get kidney damage, liver damage. In children, you can get heart inflammation. It's called myocarditis.
Okay.
So what you're seeing is lung inflammation, pneumonia. You see strokes. It affects clotting. You see, so you're seeing all kinds of things.
So with the varied symptoms, there are some people who are asymptomatic. Then unfortunately, there are many who have died. Mm-hmm. So what would you say to the person who, now we're in this period of talking about vaccines and vaccines being distributed, the person who says, I want to take my chances. Given the varied symptoms, there's a possibility I may be asymptomatic. So why should I take a vaccine when there's so many varied symptoms? And is there any precondition or anything? First, they were saying it was seniors and then those who had preconditions that were most at risk. But now we see young people who obviously are contracting the virus, and some even have died young, and they're definitely not seniors. So what would you say to the person, given the very symptoms, who are considering taking the vaccine, but then at the same time, they're like, I don't know how it's going to affect me. And is there anything else that I can do to protect myself against this virus? Can I take herbs? Can I drink enough ginger tea or whatever? Like, what would you say to the person who is thinking along those lines?
I definitely, as a primary care doctor, want to encourage them to continue to focus on their health. You can do things in conjunction with your doctor, like supplements, vitamins, exercise, healthy eating, to boost your immune system and make yourself healthy. But we know, based on cases, that you can have no pre-existing condition, be completely healthy, be young, and die from this disease. Okay. And this is part of the unknown of this virus. We don't know why. So it is a bit of a gamble to think that you can get COVID and survive. I mean, many people do, but we don't know how to predict who will survive.
Okay, so there's no way really for us to really know or to tell right now at this time who will be most susceptible to the most severe symptoms of the virus. So, and your age, that really doesn't matter. You could get the virus and it could have a severe impact on your body and cause the inflammation that you guys discussed.
Exactly. I mentioned the MISC in children. I mean, obviously children for the most part are healthy without pre-existing conditions. They're young. There have been children who have died from COVID.
Okay.
So I would not chance it, and I would trust the vaccine more than I would trust this virus.
Okay. So now let's talk about this vaccine, right? So you guys have explained vaccines in general. The COVID-19 vaccine in particular. Of course, majority of people probably have heard of the companies now, Pfizer and Moderna. Mm-hmm. There's been some concern maybe related to gene manipulation. Is this somehow going to affect our DNA? And are we all going to be robots controlled by, something outside of ourselves? Talk to me about what is the vaccine? What is it? What is happening? How is it developed? As much as you want to share about this vaccine, we want to hear about the vaccine.
So, Pastor, I've been to barbershops also, so I could talk about that. So, I'm gonna get a little technical, and so let me know if I get too technical. So, the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine are messenger RNA vaccines, and it's for vaccine development, it's relatively new. And the way that, so there's a central dogma in terms of our bodies. So all our bodies are made out of protein. And the protein, when you talk about, our cells have a nucleus, and then you have, and the nucleus resides within each cell. And in our nucleus is DNA. And that is our genetic code. And based on that DNA then makes RNA, that makes amino acids, that makes proteins, and then makes our tissues and all the rest of our body, right? And so when we're talking about messenger RNA, what they do is they take the genetic material of the virus that makes the subunit spike protein, and they inject that, they put that in a syringe, and that gets injected into our body, and that's taken up by our cells. When it's taken up by our cells, it does not enter our genetic code. It does not enter our nucleus. It does not enter our DNA. It's RNA. And what that does, the cell then takes that RNA and then makes the viral protein.
Okay.
Right? Once it makes the viral protein then is taken up by our immune system, and we develop an immune response to that viral protein. Once that RNA is injected into our cells and that protein's made, it's gone within 24 hours.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So there's no RNA hanging out in our bodies. There's no RNA that's going to be incorporated into our DNA. That does not happen.
It's gone within 24 hours.
It's gone within 24 hours. So within that initial immune response, we get about 50% protection. And that's why we need to come back again and get another booster.
Okay.
Right? Once you get another booster, then you develop a more robust immune response, or what they call a secondary immune response. And then our body responds more robustly to when we get a real infection.
Okay.
Right? And that's what happens. And so that's why we get the fevers and stuff like that. And Jamila could talk about that. And so that's messenger RNA vaccine development that with Pfizer and also Moderna. There are other vaccines that are coming out, and they use different technology, but there's no, and when you talk about the vaccine is the messenger RNA. It's a little fluid to keep it, soluble, and it's a lipid. There's no tracking device. There's no mercury. There's no preservative.
Okay.
Right. It's just really those are the things that is being utilized.
And within 24 hours, make sure within 24 hours, the RNA that was injected is gone.
That's correct.
It leaves within 24 hours.
Right. So, and this is just it's really clever, actually. So when you get infected by a virus, particularly an RNA virus, that's what happens. The virus comes into your body, it gets into your cells take up the virus, it destroys the virus, and then it creates proteins that then come out of the cells and your immune response. That is exactly what happens when you're naturally infected.
Okay.
And so what it's doing is basically they, in cell culture, created a fake virus. It's not a virus. And they're duplicating what the immune response does.
Okay. Excellent. This is very helpful to understand exactly what's happening. So there are different companies that are coming out. Pfizer came out with one. Moderna came out with one. Johnson & Johnson's talking about. Are there differences between their vaccines? Are there differences in approaches? How the clinical trial? Any differences there are many different companies coming out with different.
That's correct.
Vaccines.
And they're coming out more and more. And so we just talked about Pfizer and we talked about Moderna. And then you have, just you said, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca. Those are non-replicating viral vectors. And so what they do is they take some of the RNA and put it in a vector, and it's doing the same thing. It's showing the body the messenger RNA, the viral vector, and it's causing an immune response the same way. But there's not a replicating virus at all. And versus Sanofi and Novavax are actually taking the spike protein that's on the virus and actually giving that and injecting that into cells, and you're developing an immune response to that. And so the spike protein is needed on the virus to actually enter our cells. And what it's doing is you're basically showing the body the protein, so you develop response so the virus cannot infect you.
Okay.
Or when it does, it doesn't really go very far because your immune response is very robust.
Okay. So now when I think of protein, think of chicken, and I think of supplements that people are taking, you know, muscle heads and bodybuilders and things like that. You said the spike protein. Mm-hmm. What exactly are you referring to when you talk about the virus and the spike protein? What is that? Right.
So when you think of a viral particle, we're talking about very, very small, right? Nanometers, even smaller. And so the virus, and particularly coronavirus, is made up of RNA, and then it has proteins that make up an envelope, right? And in the envelope, and you end up having these proteins that sit on the envelope that allows the virus to bind to cells. And based on those proteins on the virus, that makes certain cells susceptible to it. Okay. And so the ACE receptor that's on our cells, that are on various cells within our lung and other tissues, this spike protein binds to that receptor and undergoes a conformation change and allows it to enter the cells. Okay. And so what they show is that spike protein that we want to develop an immune response, and that prevents us from infection.
Okay.
Craig does a great job of breaking down the science. If I can dumb it down a little bit,
please.
It's just when I talk to children, everyone knows the picture of the coronavirus, and it has the spikes on the circle.
Right,
and
right. Yes,
Corona
that's
stands
right.
for crown.
That's right.
So the spikes on the crown, that's the spike protein.
Okay, the spikes on the crown with the picture.
That's correct.
That's the spike protein. Okay, excellent.
Thank you, Jamila.
We all understand that.
Good.
All right. So you mentioned that the vaccination and the process of being vaccinated would be very similar, at least from a physiological standpoint, very similar to if you were to get the virus naturally and your immune system's response to it. So what do you say to the person who says, I've already had it? You know, I got the virus. Thank God. I lived through it. I was healed. Do I need to get the vaccine?
So great question. And we actually know the answer to that because in the Pfizer study, they did testing of people before they gave the vaccine or the placebo. And about 1% of people who had a previous infection actually got reinfected. It's 1%, so it's limited data, but that suggests, and this is why the CDC came out and said that if you have a previous infection, you should be vaccinated.
So you should be vaccinated.
You should be vaccinated. You would benefit from a vaccine. Let me also say that you want to wait until you are no longer contagious. So you want to wait 10 days from the beginning of your symptoms and fever-free and feeling better.
Okay, so if I have the virus currently, then I need to wait at least 10 days or until I'm fever-free and symptom-free?
Symptom-free. And I will say, too, based on the studies, we know that the natural immunity, a natural infection, if you've had COVID before, you probably will be protected. It is rare to be reinfected within 60 to 90 days.
Okay.
But after 60 to 90 days, you could get reinfected.
So after I've had COVID, I'm safe for 60 to 90 days at max.
That's what we think right now, yes. 60
to 90 days, which means then I definitely should be vaccinated at some point to be protected for a longer period of time.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So as it relates to this vaccine, you guys have done an excellent job explaining about the different companies and the differences between the two, as well as who should be vaccinated. Now, dealing with the vaccination, it's a smaller dose of the virus or something that is being injected into our bodies of some sort of the protein. What are the side effects and symptoms of that?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you look at the actual reported in the study side effects, it's what you would expect from an immune response, but on a lower incidence. So in general, there's going to be some soreness, some redness and swelling at the injection site. That's probably the number one reported. And then a good percentage of people, somewhere between 30% of people, report maybe some body aches, fatigue, headache, and a lower percentage might report a fever. And all of those things can be treated with over-the-counter Tylenol, Motrin, and last no more than 24 or 48 hours.
Okay.
And from a personal standpoint, since I know now that I've been unblinded from the Pfizer study, I got the vaccine.
Okay.
And I actually did experience those side effects.
Okay.
But again, it went away within 24 to 48 hours.
So I want to make sure I'm hearing correctly. So you have been vaccinated.
Correct.
You were part of the Pfizer trial. Is that okay?
In the fall, when they enrolled volunteers, I was one of the 40,000 people across the globe who volunteered to be in that phase 3 trial.
Now, be honest with me. Are you feeling the same?
I'm feeling
Are
the
you
same.
Are you feeling the same?
No one
now?
is tracking me.
Are you
Pastor.
sure? Nobody's tracking you.
my
her
my
DNA is
genes
the
are the same.
Okay. You feeling the same? Nobody's tracking you. No problems with your vision or anything.
Yeah.
Okay, you feel the same.
I feel great.
Yeah.
Feel great. Okay, excellent. This is good to know. So you have been vaccinated. You're here, praise the Lord, and you feel fine. Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. So dealing with the vaccine as well. So one of the concerns that has been lifted, and as a matter of fact, Time Magazine came out with the article, their cover story, The Vaccine Revolution, and they gave some readers and individuals an opportunity to respond. And one of the big things is this has been Operation Warp Speed.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Generally, vaccines don't come out as quickly as this one has.
That's correct.
How can we trust in this vaccine? And it's happened so quickly in comparison to other vaccines, just too fast for some people.
Yeah. So it's a great question. And so first, let me start off and say no step was skipped in development of this vaccine. What normally happens, and I think I went through the different steps in terms of safety and different, ramping up efficacy and then approval. COVID-19, when it was first identified in China, it was sequenced immediately by the Chinese, and then they published that information.
Okay.
Right? And they shared that to all the research around the world.
Okay.
Right? And it was a tremendous amount of coordination and collaboration because we knew this was going to be bad. Okay. Because in 2002, we had SARS. In 2008, we had MERS. And they're related coronaviruses. They're all related.
They're all related?
Yes. So SARS, MERS, and COVID-19 are related. So there are 4 coronaviruses that circulate normally that causes the common cold.
Okay.
Right?
Oh, okay.
And so the SARS, MERS, and COVID-19 are related coronaviruses. And so when they saw these viruses, they say, oh, this is going to be a bad one because we had no immunity against the virus.
Okay.
So once they found the virus, they sent out the sequence. When they sent out a sequence, research labs all over the world started collaborating and they sequenced it within a month. Normally, that takes 3 years.
Okay.
So right
they
there,
sequenced it in a month.
And just think about what our cell phones could do 10 years ago compared to now.
Right. Okay.
Technology just allows us to move very, very quickly, and and there wasn't any competition with that. Not only that, the pharmaceutical companies said, "Man, this is going to be bad," and they started saying, "We're going to try to start our work on vaccines." The Operation Warp Speed was twofold. It enabled a lot of resources to be dedicated in terms of manufacturing and a lot of funding, right? And so what it allowed for the companies to do is that at the same time they were doing the safety and dosing, efficacy, and then the application to FDA, at the same time they were doing ramping up for manufacturing, and then manufacturing the different components for the vaccine development and actually the vaccine. So they actually overlap them. So if you're thinking about it, 10 to 15 is a linear timeline. What they're able to do is superimpose the different steps: safety, manufacturing, approval.
Okay.
At the same time.
At the same time.
At the same time. So they overlap. And so no step was skipped. They basically overlapped them.
Okay.
It was a tremendous financial risk, but there was no risk in terms of safety in that whole process. Meaning that's why the United States and different companies bought the vaccines before they were actually approved.
Okay. So there was no step in the process that was skipped in order to get us to the point where we are now.
So the approval for a flu vaccine that needs 100 and then 30,000 people enrolled, the same thing for COVID-19.
Okay.
Right? The same approval process to get approved by the drug safety panel. So you have an institutional review board, a drug safety panel, and then an FDA panel that still exists. And then just from a personal standpoint, some of the researchers that were involved in the development of the vaccine are people that I know and that are people of color. So Kizmikia Corbett, she was involved in the Moderna vaccine development. She's an NIH researcher. She's been highlighted all over the place. You can find out about her. Dr. James Hildreth, who I did my PhD with, I did my PhD in his lab at Johns Hopkins. He's the president of Meharry Medical School.
Okay.
And he was on the FDA panel.
Okay.
And so, and
upstanding people.
Yeah. So James is the first scientist to get a PhD at Hopkins, African American, president of Meharry, and he's one well-renowned viral immunologist. And so he was on the FDA panel, and there were other people that are involved in the approval that are people of diverse backgrounds.
Okay. This is very helpful. No part of the process was skipped. Strong medical doctors and scientists were working on it. People of color and diverse backgrounds were working on this. I heard you say something about the 100,000. So one of the other concerns that has been purported is, I don't want to be the first in line.
Yeah.
You guys talked about the clinical trials and things like that. And by the time it comes to the average consumer or person who wasn't a part of the clinical trial, what number are we? Because, a lot of times people say with technology and things, it has glitches the first batch. So, well,
Jamila was the first one, so you don't have to worry.
And she's still alive.
Yeah, she's still
alive, and she says she's feeling fine.
Yeah.
So talk to me about where are we actually? What number are we in line? Like around about? How many people have actually received it?
So if you go to yourshot.nc.org, there actually are phases that the state allocates vaccines for. So you can actually look up to date phases to know who's in which phase. So we are currently, it starts off with 1A. So if I wasn't in the trial, healthcare workers and people who live in nursing homes and work in nursing homes are in the first phase 1A.
Okay.
And that includes millions of people.
Okay.
Then phase 1B includes those who are over the age of 75.
Okay.
And that is just now starting.
Okay. So it's starting now, 1B.
If you are over the age of 75, you will be in 1B. But even 1B already has millions of people who have gotten the vaccine ahead of you.
Okay. Even 1B. Even those who are over 75 right now already have millions of people.
That's correct.
Millions.
Only in the United States. It's even more so
outside of the U.S.
That's 1 million in the U.S.
Correct.
That's correct. That's correct. And so when you think about it, the original plan was they're going to have 20 million doses per month. There's some delay in that rollout. So as the months roll on, you're going to have several millions of people that are going to have vaccinated. Some people might be getting it earlier, but...
So, for example... The nurses and doctors at my practice have all been vaccinated.
Okay.
Many of the frontline workers in the emergency room and the ICUs in our local hospitals have already been vaccinated.
Really?
Yeah, they're in 1A.
Have they rolled out for pastors in churches and volunteers in churches at all yet? Do they have that plan yet? So this is good to know. So we are not, when it comes, by the time it comes to us, in 1B, it's already been millions of people.
That's correct.
In the United States that have received the vaccine prior to it coming to the 1B. So that means by the time that we actually are up and they call our name, millions more have been vaccinated.
In other countries, they're way more efficient than us. So you can even go and see, Pfizer has been distributed out in United Kingdom and other countries. So they are probably way ahead of us in terms of vaccine doses.
Okay. Now you see your spot. Can you repeat that again?
Sure.
I want us to put that up on the screen. Can you say that website again?
It's yourspotyourshot.nc.gov.
Yourspotyourshot.nc.gov. Yourspotyourshot.nc.gov, which will tell you the rollout and how they're doing it.
Correct. And I would just say phase 2 will include essential workers. And there's a definition on the website. For example, that those would be grocery store workers, postal workers, teachers, and people over the age of 65 with chronic healthcare conditions are in that group. And then after that, so the third phase will include students. And who am I missing? Students and then lastly, are healthy, everyone else, 16 to 64 who are healthy.
I didn't hear anything about pastors and churches yet.
So by the time you get it.
By the time I get it, everybody else will have had it already.
60 million people. Yeah,
You're the last phase.
I'm the last phase.
The young healthy,
So there's been also some mention of different strands here recently. So when I am vaccinated, does that protect me against all strands? Will I have to be vaccinated again? How is that going to work?
Right. So, the interesting thing about RNA viruses is that they replicate very frequently. And as they replicate, they actually cause mutations. And so, yes, they're already seeing variants of strains in circulation. And that's because a lot of people are not vaccinated. And so a lot of people get infected. The virus has the ability to replicate, and then you're going to get mutations. Luckily, the vaccines that are out on the market right now have shown to be protective. And that's because the scientists are really smart, such that what the messenger RNA they use actually is for a conformational rather than a sequence. And so any virus that's able to infect the cells, this vaccine is protective against that.
Okay. Any virus that is able to affect the cells.
Yeah, so far.
So
they've seen about 4 or 5 different mutations, some in Europe, some in Asia, some in the United States. And so far, the ones that have been tested, the vaccines have been protective. And so that's really good. And so, and I think, you never know what you're going to be infected with.
Okay.
And so what's available is a vaccine that's been shown to be 90% protective. And so, it'll be a good suggestion to go in and get vaccinated based on that information.
And I would just add, that's what flu does every year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so in my experience with flu throughout the season, flu also mutates throughout the season. And so that's why the efficacy may go down towards the end of the flu season. But there's usually some cross protection.
That's correct.
So it may not be 95% effective like it is right now, but it may be 50% effective if it mutates significantly.
Okay.
Which is better than 0% if you don't get the vaccine.
Absolutely. But this has been tremendously helpful. And it is an added benefit with your medical experience and your professional experience, your knowledge and expertise. But we're sitting here and I'm talking to 2 doctors that look like us, minorities. And I think this is very important because Pew Research, they asked the question, how many people are planning on being vaccinated? Are you planning on receiving the vaccine?
Yeah.
And only 42% of African Americans responded that they would go and be vaccinated, in comparison to 81% of Asian Americans, 61% of whites. And so given the history, Tuskegee, and some of the skepticism that we have as a result of historically African Americans maybe being misdiagnosed, maybe unfairly treated and abused. As two Black doctors, what would you say to minority communities that are looking at that history and they are cynical in this moment? What would you say to them? How would you speak to them as two African American doctors?
Yeah, so I would like to kind of tackle this one first. So first, I would say, to acknowledge that there is a history, right? And so you mentioned Tuskegee, but even before Tuskegee, from 1619, there's always been evidence of abuse of Black bodies for whatever purpose. The atrocity of Tuskegee opened up many opportunities and developments since then. And so with the Tuskegee experiment, those individuals were enrolled in a study without their consent. They were lied to and duped, and they were not offered any treatment. After that time period, things have changed. And so you cannot enroll someone into a study without informed consent. You have to lay out exactly what's being involved. They have to see it in writing, right? Before you even get to that far, there's a institutional review board that actually had to see the protocol. What is the drug? What is the drug supposed to do? What are you supposed to see? What are the treatments? And while the study ends. After that, you go to a biosafety committee, and then you have a drug review board. And the drug review board is then taking all the clinical data, because the people need to be monitored when they're on the study, and they're putting that in a database. And these people that cannot work for the company, cannot benefit from anything from the company, are seeing that data. And then they say, okay, this person's getting sick, or this person's this person needs treatment, this person, the study is not working, let's stop this. Okay. Once you have that, then it gets, that whole document gets submitted to FDA for approval.
Okay.
So that is the whole process. So, when people say, I don't trust this, and, a lot of things, that has changed, but then also the people involved in research has changed. Okay. The reason why I went to the research is because I felt that people, my people are suffer from a lot of diseases and maladies, and I wanted to be part of the process, part of the face of trying to show and improve and create drugs and therapies. And so in the treatment of COVID, there's scientists involved that are Black and brown, and there are also people that are part of the review board. The study actually involved a fair amount of minorities in the study. Okay, good. And the study also involved a lot of individuals that had other diseases such as obesity, heart disease, and other things. And so there's a lot has changed. Okay, so times have significantly changed. That's correct. Which means that we can have a greater level of trust in the process, and that as African Americans, we are not going to be mistreated or manipulated in some way through this vaccination.
And I would just like to add, unfortunately, because of the mistrust historically in the medical community, and there have been health disparities. So we are more likely to have those vulnerable conditions that could lead to more severe COVID, things like Craig mentioned, like obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes. And so I think this is a time, just like the political process where we all came to the polls. Right. This is a time for us to kind of reclaim what our ancestors couldn't. And take control of your own health. Okay. Because the disparities of the past, there's now something that we can do about it. And we now know, because of the things that have come to light historically, like Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks, that we actually have a voice. In medicine. And as a Christian, I'm talking to my pastor. I prayed about being in the trial. And that's actually why I wanted to be in the trial, because I knew that this mistrust existed.
Yes.
And I knew that there are not going to be a lot of Black people to enroll in a study
Right.
of an unknown new technology.
Right.
And so I wanted to be a part of the trial so that I can speak for us.
Okay.
And so I can basically provide my testimony
Right.
about the vaccine. And Henrietta Lacks, many of you may have heard of her from the movie, but her cells actually have been used for decades. They're now called HeLa cells for Henrietta Lacks. And her cells are actually what's used for decades in mRNA technology.
Wow.
So, she has sacrificed, along with the Tuskegee men and many other of our ancestors, to get us to this vaccine, this particular vaccine. And so I do feel like it is okay to have mistrust, but speak to the people in the medical community that you trust. If that's your primary care doctor, if that's a friend who's in the nursing community or a friend in the scientific community, talk to them and have open and honest conversations.
Wonderful. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
I would like to say also, so vaccination is one aspect, but we already know that when we are not vaccinated and we get sick and we go to the hospital, African Americans have a 3 times more death rate than white people. And the reality is that, whatever that reason may be, is it due to the fact that we have other diseases, or is it the fact that there's a bias or that we're not getting the care that we needed? We have to understand that you do not want to wait to get in the hospital because we do not fare well once we get COVID.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And so you can either get vaccinated, take your chances, but understand that there's a 3 times more increase in death rate once you get hospitalized.
Okay.
So this conversation is not something to debate over the internet.
Okay.
You need to go talk to your primary care and decide what's the best mode of treatment in terms of deciding why you want to get vaccinated or not. There's not something to read off the internet and then make a decision.
Okay. Don't get your information from the internet.
There's a lot of stuff.
Don't go to Google.
Yes, this is not a decision you make reading stuff on the internet that people that don't look like you, that are not trained.
Right.
You need to kind of make an educated decision.
Have a discussion.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. You all have been so helpful to us tonight. I'm very appreciative. Last question I have. You are very active members in our church, medical doctors, research doctors. You have done so much as it relates to medical research and medical advancement, and yet you're very strong in your faith. And sometimes people see a tension between the two. Yeah. Faith in science, faith in medicine. And so some people may say, I'm just going to believe God. I'm just going to have faith. Mm-hmm. And the Lord has kept me. If they haven't gotten corona, or if they got it and they were healed, the Lord kept me, and he's just going to keep on keeping me. How would you respond? How does your faith inform your practice of medicine and science? And how does your faith inform you? And how would you respond to a person who said, I'm just going to believe God?
Well, I am first a child of God as well. And anywhere on social media, you'll see that as my first title. And I see my profession as my expression of my gratitude for God saving me and giving me the blessings that he's gotten me this far. So as a medical doctor, I also pray, and I prayed about this virus. And I personally believe that this vaccine is going to be our way to fight this war against this invisible virus.
Yeah.
So I would say that God uses people on earth and scientists on earth, whether they're Christian or not, to do what he feels is best for us. And so I don't think that they're two separate fighting philosophies.
Okay.
As a medical doctor, I see miracles every day. You know, the birth of a baby is a miracle.
Absolutely.
And it just amazes me that you can go from one cell, divide into two, and then you have this baby. And that miracle of childbirth actually, it strengthens my faith, because I know that as humans, we can't explain everything. Scientists cannot explain everything to this day. And this virus and this pandemic is evidence of that.
Absolutely.
And so I think the two complement each other.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say, Pastor, I just really want us to get back to normal. And
Get back to church.
exactly, I want to get back to church.
Right.
And the way we want to get back to church is that we need a high percentage of people vaccinated. Right. I want to see my family, and there's no way of waiting this out.
Okay.
You know, this is not, you know, and you know, when someone decides not to get vaccinated, it's somewhat selfish in the sense that, now being said that if you have a medical reason not to get vaccinated, that's valid, but you're possibly endangering other people. And so if you're going to be seeing your family, you're going to be seeing people that cannot get vaccinated, you know, you have to think about that. And so, I'm a child of God, you know, and I don't see any conflict between the science. I feel like I've seen God inspire technology and drug development and save lives. And I've seen people that were on death's door cured by things created in the lab. And so, it's, God is definitely in it. And so I you see a lot of stuff in there about, science is evil and stuff like that. I don't believe that is in the play here with this vaccine.
Both of you have given very eloquent responses connected to how your faith informs your practice. And Dr. Fletcher, Dr. Miller, you said that God uses people on earth. And I want to thank both of you. I do believe that the Lord is using both of you in an incredible way, and he used you immensely tonight to help clarify and hopefully assuage some of the fears and the concerns that are connected to this vaccination. You all are on the front lines in research and in taking care of people who are sick. And so we want to pray blessings upon you. We pray that God will continue to cover your family, that God will continue to cover your children, cover your lives, and that he will continue to open doors of opportunity for you to share, not with our people and others, about what is happening in this medical world and medical arena. And prayerfully, as a result of your sacrifice and your service, you will see much fruit, not only in our community, but beyond. And so we are grateful for you. I'm thankful for you. We trust you. We trust you. And so I know that both of you all have a great degree of integrity. And so thank you for being with us tonight. I know that there may be some people who have more questions that maybe were not addressed tonight.
Yes.
Next week on the 20th, we will have a live Zoom. It's the inauguration, so we're going to be talking a little bit about that, but then we'll also have an opportunity for individuals who maybe have a question that wasn't addressed tonight, for them to address their concerns on that Zoom. But thank you so much for taking out time tonight to be with us. And I am informed. I feel a little better. Now I want you all to talk to somebody about moving pastors and clergy and everything up to 1C, baby, 1C. But thank you so much for your sharing with us tonight. We're very grateful and appreciative.
It's our pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
God bless you. I want to thank you for joining us. I hope that you are as informed as I am tonight regarding the vaccine as a result of Dr. Craig and Dr. Jamila Fletcher's insight that they shared with us. We thank God for them. After the recording, they shared with me that in order to gain herd immunity, we need 75% of people vaccinated. 75%. And so even as we have personal concern in this moment, as Christians, we also have some communal responsibility. That our responsibility in this moment is not just self-preservation, that's important, but it's also communal preservation. Right now, I'm looking out in front of empty seats in a congregation. Communally, our community, our embodied fellowship has been disrupted. And we believe, as Dr. Fletcher shared, that there is hope, and this hope is found through a vaccine. We know that our hope is in God, but God uses people. And so thank God for the medical advancement and the medical research that has gone into this vaccine. Thank God for the trials and the clinical trials that have been done and conducted in order to ensure its efficacy. And I believe that as Christians, we must be prayerful. We must be informed, talking to informed individuals, and we must seek God's will. But we have communal responsibility connected to this vaccination. Pray we will not be fearful. Pray we will be courageous. If you have questions that we did not address tonight, I reiterate that on next week, on the 20th, we will have an opportunity for you on a live Zoom to ask questions, and Dr. Craig and Dr. Jamila Fletcher will be back with us. Thank you for joining us tonight. Let's pray. Father, we give you thanks and we give you praise that you have kept us, that we are alive. We've come through the fire and we've come through the flood, and it's all because of you. Lord, as we give you praise for keeping us, we also thank you for the insight and the wisdom that you give to doctors, that you do work through flesh and blood. Thank you for the medical advancements that can help to bring about healing in our individual lives and in our community. Our lives have been completely disrupted, God, but we have hope. God, you will restore. You will heal. As we are courageous and we trust you and we believe you and we take faithful action. Thank you for your people tonight. Thank you for watching over us. Bless us and keep us. Make your face to shine upon us and be gracious to us. Lift up the light of your countenance upon us and give us your peace. In the name of Jesus Christ our Lord, let all of God's children say, Amen. Thank you for joining us.